guys, welcome back to Between Sessions. My name is Ebony Harris.
And I'm Elisa Vokeen, and we are two brown chicks changing the face of therapy on both sides of the couch. Yes.
Oh, goodness. We are back.
It's a good day.
Again.
We're back.
And today we're talking about therapists needing therapy as well. Or therapists need therapy too, as our shirt says.
Therapists need therapy too. I know I do.
So we're going to chat a little bit about that. Probably a lot about just like the expectations of therapists and how people view therapists, and like you have to have your whole life together to be a therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not so much.
Right.
So Lisa,
right.
what do you want to start with? Because I know this is, you always like to talk about how you love your therapist.
I love my therapist. I love therapy. I love the opportunity to heal. I love being a therapist. I love all things therapy. But I think part of what we can talk about is why therapists need therapy too.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like what you said. There's this misconception. I think it's a misconception, and I think it's also on some level people have hope that maybe we do have it all together, because then we can give them all the answers. Mm-hmm. Hey, Charles, how you doing? Charles from the barbershop group has tuned in this morning. But yeah, so I think people want us to have it all together, because I think so many of us want to believe that you can have it all together.
Right. And if I see you and you have it all together, or in my eyes you do, then you're someone that I can actually talk to.
Mm-hmm.
To help me get my life all together.
You're going to have the answers, because you mastered life.
Right.
Yes.
That's not
real life. No.
So what are some reasons that we need to go to therapy? Well, obviously, there are a lot. But specifically, we can start with that, even specifically as being therapists, right? Because our job is to help people heal. Our job is to kind of be the support for people. And sometimes that can be a lot, and you can take on a lot depending on how you deal with that.
Absolutely. So I think, especially when you're first starting, I think everybody needs to have a really good supervisor. And of course, you'll be required to have a supervisor, but I think it's important to have a supervisor that's not just going to help you sort of address the clinical stuff, but to really address the self of the therapist stuff. I was really fortunate that I had an awesome supervisor, and really helping me work through some of that, but there were still limitations because she's my supervisor, she wasn't my therapist. So having a therapist, because this stuff that we are dealing with, stuff is going to come up for us, right? Like it's going to start bubbling up, and there it is. And it's like, hey, remember you went through that too.
Right.
Or, even if you didn't go necessarily through the exact same situation, what I think collectively as human beings have experienced is we've all experienced, rejection. We've all experienced abandonment. We've all experienced betrayal. These are common human experiences. And when we're working with somebody, and that's what that's being held in the space, like that's what's the theme of what's going on, it can trigger our own stuff.
Right. As topics come up, if there are things that maybe you haven't worked through, or maybe you have, but it can bring up things that's like, oh, that is reflective of my life too. And then, although we're trained to, of course, stay in the moment and focus on the client and things like that, if it's something that's unresolved, that's something that could kind of take you out of that and kind of get you caught up in whatever you're feeling in that moment.
And I think the getting caught off guard, I think so often that's just what happens, like you don't expect it to show up, or you're like, oh, damn, didn't anticipate that to have the effect on me that it did.
Right.
Because we're human. I think therapists need therapy too. Why? Because we're human.
Right. And we're impacted by the same things everybody else is impacted by.
Yeah. That's going to be the overarching theme here, folks. We can finish the show at
Right,
this point.
and we're done. But I think that's interesting though, because I think people assume that when you have the information and the tools, then you should be able to just quickly apply it to yourself. But that doesn't always happen when you're in it, right? So if I'm sitting in it, yes, I can say, okay, these are the things that I might tell a client, or I might not even be able to view it in that way because I can't have that perspective of the outside person. And that's what helps a lot just in therapy in general. Like you can be in it and you can be like, I just feel like things aren't together or whatever. But having a therapist that can kind of say, but let's look at the bigger picture or help you put some things together. Sometimes that's harder to do by yourself.
Right. And I've said it before, and it's you're too close to the issue. You're too close to the problem.
Right.
You know, if I always say, if you have food on your face, unless you have a mirror reflecting it back to you, or somebody tells you, someone is reflecting it back to you and tells you like, hey, so you got your breakfast on your face, I'm not going to know because it's too close to me. And so that's what the therapist serves for in therapy, is to be able to reflect back to us that which is too close and that maybe gets triggered when the theme shows up in therapy space.
Right. I remember when I was in grad school, I don't remember who said this, but somebody was like, you can only help people to the extent that you've helped yourself. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it was kind of like, if you have a lot of unhealed pieces, it can be difficult to help someone get past that if they're similar things, if that makes sense. So if I have unhealed issues with a parent and someone's coming to you for those same issues, it can become difficult for you to get them past wherever you're at. I don't know how you feel about that.
You know, I do believe that that's part of why it's important for us to do our ongoing healing, because I do think that as we're working through our stuff and more layers are being pulled back, that brings a new awareness.
Yeah.
Not only to ourselves, but to what's showing up in the therapy room.
Right.
So I I believe it to an extent. I do believe it. I don't believe that I can't help you if I haven't gone through that specific event. Because again, we talked about that last week. But I do think, now that I think it does depend, but I think there is something to be said for that.
I think it's about if it's an unhealed part of you, right? Like if it's a situation that I have not dealt with directly, but like you said, it does deal with rejection and grief or things like that, then that's different. But if it's like you specifically come in because you had an abusive parent, I had an abusive parent and I never dealt with that, I can see how that might hinder the other person's healing if you haven't really dealt with it on your own.
Right.
But again, I don't know how much I don't know if I 100% agree with it because it just depends on the situation. But I think it's important to just do what you need to do because you don't want that to show up in the therapy room and you don't want that to show up hindering your clients or things like that, even, if you don't necessarily believe it. What you said about the mirror earlier, and I saw Gladys kind of repeated that you need someone to tell you unless you have a mirror. And I always think about how we talk about the people that we have in our lives are sometimes a reflection of us. And so that's sometimes the mirror where it's like, why do I keep having these people around me that I'm frustrated with, that I'm angry with, that are doing certain things that are impacting me in this way? And then when you take a second to say, oh, well, if people mirror me, then maybe these are unhealed or things I need to work with. So I'm saying that to say that you may not see that it's an issue without someone else, or when you start having these interactions with people over and over again and realizing that they're just a reflection of whatever you're going through, then it kind of tells you, I still need to go talk to somebody.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, that's another reason why therapists need therapy too, is because we have relationships outside of the therapy room. And sometimes I think it's even a little bit harder in some regard because then you have all this information. I remember in grad school, I had a diagnosis for everybody in my life.
As you learn each other, I know exactly who that is. Yes.
Oh, you should read this book on narcissism.
Yes. Definitely. I didn't realize I knew so many people with these mental issues. Yeah.
So I think we need it too. I think part of that for us, we need to keep that in check, right? Like we need to keep that in check because a lot of us are in this field and we're just naturally at some point have been people pleasers, have some point been overdoers, rescuers. I don't know what the statistics are.
Right.
I have not done a formal research. I'm just going to say that a lot. Somebody was calling.
Oh.
I'm just going to say that a lot of us have been there. And so I think part of it is so much of what I learned being a therapist and then was able to translate that over into my therapy was boundaries.
Yeah.
Like really learning boundaries, because I knew that in order to be a really good therapist, I was going to also have to understand how to set really good boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does one do that? And so going to therapy and getting the permission also to be able to do that and still be compassionate and still be someone who cares about people, and somebody telling you like it's not your job to rescue everybody,
And I think a big part of that, like I know we're gonna, like you said, keep going back to the human piece, but even if I'm thinking about like we're people that have relationships, we're people that have businesses, we're people that have family. And so when you said boundaries, the first thing I thought of was boundaries with clients, right? Even that. And a lot of times when we have kind of those shaky boundaries with clients, you start to recognize like, oh, my boundaries with other people are similar.
Exactly.
So that's a reason to seek therapy, is like, okay, well, I love what I do, but I keep feeling like I'm letting clients kind of run over me, or clients aren't necessarily respecting what I'm saying or whatever. So that's something that I need to work out. And as a therapist, I think we're really good at, like, some of us are really good at like identifying when things aren't going right. It's internal work that we have to do.
Yeah.
And so in order to do internal work, you have to do the work, which means go in and talk to someone or deal with that however you think you need to. So therapy is that option.
Yeah.
And so when you are frustrated with your career, when you are frustrated, like you're feeling like you're going home and taking on all this stuff that people are giving you every day, why wouldn't you need to speak to someone?
Yeah. So I also think we need therapy because, especially if you're, it's kind of piggybacking off of the themes that come up. But if you're someone in particular who works with a lot of trauma, if trauma is something that you're regularly working with, that can have an impact, and you can become traumatized, right? Like you become traumatized by the content of what you're hearing. So if you work in an environment where this is really present, or you're having like these really tough sort of cases, and you're starting to notice disturbances in your sleep, not being able to relax, anxiety, stuff that you never dealt with before. And now you're like, I don't know what's happening. That's why we have to have a space for us to be able to go also to process some of what we're hearing, because maybe you didn't have a lot of trauma in your upbringing, and this is the first time you're kind of hearing about these atrocities that happen in the world, or meeting people or getting insight into it. So
yeah, I think that's a huge one, is it doesn't necessarily have to be your stuff for you to need to get help surrounding it.
And for it to traumatize you.
Right. I was about to say, we've talked about vicarious trauma and how when even the news, like we're living in the same world as everyone else. So along with us doing a job that is about helping, healing, all of that, we're also taking in the news, we're taking in the world, we have all these things going on. And so it's not, it makes sense that we would also need a space as well.
Absolutely.
The good thing is that we tend to have relationships with other therapists. And so although, yes, we can't do therapy with those therapists, it is helpful when you're processing or talking to, it's a little different, because I know me and you talk all the time, it's a little different having a conversation with another therapist than it is with a friend, right? And so even that is kind of like okay, so maybe, I should be in therapy, or maybe this is something I need to explore, because as we're talking to each other, we're kind of like, it's sometimes hard to turn off the therapist's brain. So, so it's a lot of reflection and a lot of compassion.
Let me hold space for you.
Right. So it sounds like, which is interesting, because I feel like with my couples, that's a lot of, I was thinking about couples and being in couples therapy as a couples therapist or whatever. But with a lot of my couples, I feel like that's a lot we're doing is just trying to teach them the skills like of compassion and of validating and things like that. But I always thought it was interesting, the like marriage therapists that talk about the fact that they've been in marriage therapy, right? That talk about the fact, I know I was watching a video of, it wasn't the Gottmans, it was, what are their names? It's another couple that are therapists that write books and things like that. But they talked about their whole experience with like being in therapy and like some of the things that they explored and things like that. So although they were already marriage counselors, like when I'm in a relationship with you, one, I might be still repeating some things from my childhood because I haven't had relationships to really explore that or deal with it with, because it's only so much work you can do by yourself if your issue is within relationships. But I don't want to keep saying the same thing over and over, but when we come down to it, like there's only so much I can do because we all have our stuff. And absolutely. Even though I'm a relationship therapist, that does not mean that I'm not a person that still struggles with communication or intimacy and all the other things that people go through. And so it's okay for you to need to deal with that and get a handle on it.
Yeah. Again, we're not exempt from these challenges. And I think having the information is only one part.
Right.
It's sort of like we're the container for that information. And if we have blocks to even be able to embody that information, there's some healing that has to go on. It's like, we know that if you want to live a healthy lifestyle, incorporate movement and eat certain food, we know it. We all know it, right? So the information. Why is it then that it's not always applied, right? Because there's usually more going on. And so it's the same thing for therapists. They may have the information, it's like when you go see, you've seen the doctors, they're cardiologists, and then you catch them outside and they're having a cigarette during their break.
Right. Just because you have the information doesn't mean you're always able to apply it to yourself without the help of someone else.
Yes. And for us to do our internal work as to why we are unable to apply it, like what's going on. So, So Camilla has a good question. She says, what do you think common barriers or challenges are for therapists going to therapy?
I will give you my number one
challenge. I was like, go ahead. I was like, I know you was good.
I love the therapists that I've built relationships with. Yeah. Because obviously I've gotten to know them and I get to see who they are. And then I can't necessarily go to therapy with them because now we have a relationship. So I know for me, that's been the hardest thing is that, especially since starting Melanin and mental health, but just in general, like meeting people and having a connection with them, be like, dang, you are a good person. And the people that I refer to all the time are probably people that I would want to go to therapy with, but I can't. Yeah. So I think that's definitely a struggle with being a therapist, trying to find a therapist. So
I don't have that struggle because I feel like I really don't.
At least like I'm fine.
I really am good because any opportunity that I get where like I'm that person where they're like, oh, let's heal and we're going to hold space for it and it's a safe space and it's confidential. I'm like, cool, let me let you in on all this stuff. So I don't have that issue. I think the issue that I have is I think I have an idea of what I want. Mm-hmm. So I want a client. So I want a therapist, maybe I want them to focus more on, I don't know, EFT or the somatic experiencing, and so I think already I might be minimizing the list, right? Like narrowing down the list instead of going in there. In one regard, it's good because it's like, okay, I have some insight to that. But in the other one, I might not be as open to maybe trying a therapist that I think, oh no, that wouldn't be a good fit.
Right. You already set those expectations of like, this is what I need. So I need to find a therapist that fits these as opposed to going in with a lay person that's not in mental health with an open mind, like just would tell me what to do. I think, I definitely agree with that where even in therapy, I remember I was having a conversation with another friend of mine that's a therapist and she was saying like the first time she went to therapy, she was like, oh, they're reflecting. Oh, she's like naming the stuff that was oh, that's the miracle question. Oh, and sometimes you get so caught up in like the process, or you get so caught up in like, what are they doing now, that you're not really there and paying attention. Like, no, this is for you. It's not for you to like analyze their therapy skills. This is for you to get the help that you need.
Right. Yeah.
So I definitely think another struggle with finding a therapist is it kind of goes into those expectations, but just understanding your role as a client and not the therapist, kind of like taking yourself out of that. And I do that with my clients a lot when I see them like checking their watch, or when they're like, you know, like, okay, well, I don't want to, you know, like they're very much trying to like control, and it's because they care. It's because they don't want to overstep my boundaries and things like that. And I have to be like, hey, like, you know, I have this, I have a clock, I'm paying attention, like I understand. But also I think when we're in session, I will do that sometimes, where I'm like, okay, well, I only got this amount of time, so let me try to do this and do that, and or let me start wrapping up my thoughts, because if I don't, then we'll go, you know, things like that. Where you're still trying to like control the session, because you know what it feels like to be a therapist. So I don't know.
See, I just let go.
That's awesome.
You might have to boot me out. You let me go over, I might just go over.
Tell me when to leave, because if you don't, I'll be sitting here.
I'm good. You got to hold your boundaries.
Yeah. I think a big reason, and this is the first time I went to therapy was solely for this reason. My supervisor was like, you need to know what it feels like to be on the other side. She was like, you know, of course, I'm like, I don't have any issues. She's like, okay, that's fine. But then just go, because you are literally, people are coming in extremely vulnerable. They don't know what to expect. And so you need to at least just go, so that you can get the experience of walking into a stranger's office and just not knowing. And so I think that if for no other reason, therapists should experience that, so then they can figure out, how do I make this a comforting situation for the person that's coming into me? What did I like about the experience that I have, and what didn't I like about the experience I have? I know for me, like, I'm really big on like, how do I make you feel validated before we move into like solutions, where a lot of people like to go straight into solutions. I'm a person that likes to go straight into solutions sometimes in my own life, but I get, as a therapist, like it's important to have those moments of like, I hear you, I understand you, I get you, before we be like, how do I fix this? You know? Right. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other piece to it, and I experienced it a few years ago, and it helped me it helped me to have more compassion for my clients and for myself as a therapist at the same time, is I had this experience in one of my therapy sessions, and it was a new therapist that I was seeing, and she was, asking me the question. I'm like, I already know, like, I know what she's asking. I already know what my, childhood issues are.
Right.
Like, I've been there. I've worked through this forever, whatever. And just real indignant about it, right? And then she asked me a question, and it was like, I had this insight that I'd never had. And it was such an impactful moment. Like, I felt like just this wave come over me, and just grief. And I almost felt like I was going to throw up. And I was like, oh my God. And I thought to myself, immediately I thought two things. Was, how did I not see that? Kind of like what we were talking about before. I felt like I've worked on this stuff for so long, like I had no idea that was there, even though I've done a lot of therapy throughout the years, in and out of therapy. It's not like I've been in therapy every day for, the last 13 years, but you know what I'm saying, like in and out.
Right.
So like, these are issues I've worked on. I'm a therapist.
You're already giving yourself like, I should know better.
I've got the training. Yeah. How did I not see that? And so in that moment, it taught me two things. It taught me, one, we're not ready to see things until we're ready to see things, no matter how ready we think we might be. And that helped me also as a therapist to have more compassion for my clients, when maybe I think like, why are they not seeing this? Or we've kind of gone over this, like, why are we stuck? So it helped me to have more compassion and more patience with the process. Yeah. Because I think sometimes as therapists, we can beat ourselves up in that, like, we might feel like we're not getting anywhere You know, like, again, like, I think at the end of the day, we want to help people. And a lot of times we have this idea of what that would look like to help them.
Right.
And we may not see what's happening internally. And so maybe you're not going to be the therapist or the person to see when that insight comes through. Right. But not to underestimate the work that we're doing, not to underestimate the process, and to have patience and compassion for ourselves and our clients.
I think that's great. I agree. Like to kind of recognize that sometimes we put that pressure on ourselves. So like we should have figured it out.
Yeah.
And understanding that it's not always, that's not how it works. And we should know that as well.
Yeah.
Because of the training we have. But just like everybody else, we put pressure on ourselves in a certain way because when you're in this field, you're expected to be the expert.
You want to see results. Like, you know, we want people to feel better.
Yep.
We want to feel like the work that we're doing is helping people. And again, I think it's hard sometimes to remove ourselves of what we think that looks like.
Yeah. Because
sometimes helping people doesn't necessarily result in this shiny, happy package that, you know, people might show up in. But we just got to do the work. Like, we have to show up. We have to show up fully. We have to show up and be able to, again, show up in a way where our stuff is not getting in the way.
Yep. And that's what I was literally about to say. You have to show up as present as you can be in that moment. And the best way to do that is have a space for you to kind of sort out whatever you have going on so that it's not creeping into those moments in the session. So.
Absolutely. And I would say that the last reason that therapists need therapy too is because it feels so damn good to have it feels so damn good. Well, it feels so damn good for somebody else to be holding space for you. It feels so damn good for somebody else to say, hey, like, you deserve happiness and joy and healing and all of that. It's like, it feels so good to have somebody else be pouring into your healing instead of you always being. Now, the healing is not pretty. I say that all the time. But it feels good to have somebody else to show up and to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. It's great when you're a healer to have people that can do that for you as well.
Yeah.
And especially, like you said, when you're a people pleaser, when you're a giver, when you're the person that not only do your clients go to, but probably other people in your life depend on and things like that. It's nice to have like a space for you to be able to go and kind of lean on somebody else.
Oh, I had one more come up. This is another reason why therapists need therapy too, is because it actually also helps us to help our clients, but in a way where it's like maybe you learn about new resources.
That's true.
You know? Or you're connected to other healers and you're like, oh, that's exactly for me. Like what happened, you know, this year I've incorporated energy healing as part in combination with the psychotherapy. And the reason that I did that and was even learned about it was seeking out and going and getting these healings myself. And I was like, whoa, this is changing my life. This is helping me. I got to learn how to do this so I can offer it to my clients. Right. So I think from that perspective, we're able to pay it forward to our clients as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely just having relationships with therapists, but especially being in therapy, when you start to find things that's like, oh, that was extremely helpful, or that was very insightful, then you're like, where did you get that from? Let me make sure I show my next client this. So I can, help them with that. So yeah, it does give, because it's all different types of perspectives, all different types of theories that are coming together. And so when you can experience it and be like, that was good, then now I need to figure out how do I make sure my clients have that experience as well with me. So that's good. All right.
So we hope we broke it down for y'all to let you know why therapists need therapy too. Number one reason is
we're human.
We're human. We are not exempt from the human experience that includes pain and shame and abandonment and all of that stuff that is part of the party.
Right.
And so we need to be able to work through these things, and we don't have it all figured out. So sometimes we're just a few steps ahead of you when it comes to the healing process. So that's why we're able to help. but we're still in it with you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for watching and for sticking it out with us with the technical issues a little while ago.
Like you do every week.
Yes. Like you do every week. What I'll probably do, since we didn't do IG, if you missed this one, you can watch it over here, but I'll also put it on IGTV. So feel free to share it on Facebook or share it on your IG or something like that. Follow us across social media at Melanin and Mental Health, Melanin Health on Twitter. And make sure you head over to melaninandmentalhealth.com and check out the dope therapists that we have. If you need to find a therapist, as well as the merchandise and all of our previous podcasts that we've had that have been so great. Make sure you check that out. And
some of the merchandise we have this month is in honor of Pride Month. So if you go there, you can find some merchandise to support our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. And we have the Proud Ally, the Proud Therapist, a few other items there. So go check it out.
Yes. And thank you guys. Thanks, Courtney. We will talk to y'all next week.
Ciao.